Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is DVP World. You're watching World News Tonight. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. Coming up, take back control. Now, this is the slogan of the new strategy on immigration announced by the Polish Prime Minister. We will reduce illegal migration to a minimum, emphasized Donald Tusk. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. The Venice Commission has issued positive opinions on changes in Poland's justice system. Thousands of North Korean soldiers are reportedly undergoing training in Russia with possible deployment to Ukraine. Krakow is looking to introduce a tourist fee with an appeal already submitted to the government. We will not implement European ideas if they harm our interest, declared Prime Minister Donald Tusk as he unveiled key elements of his government's new migration strategy. Tusk underscored a firm commitment to minimizing illegal migration and suggested that Poland could temporarily suspend the right to asylum if necessary. Marek Steele reports.
Taking back control over migration was the main theme of the ruling Civic Coalition Party's latest rally.
Poland must regain 100% control over who comes to Poland. So that those who come to Poland are those who want to pay taxes and integrate into Polish society. They have to accept Polish standards, Polish customs.
Tusk accused those formerly in power of failing to control migration and allowing a wave of illegal migrants to flood Poland.
At the same time, the government made sure that the feelings of hatred and contempt toward migrants that they created provided political fuel for the then ruling party.
In a report published on Thursday, Poland's Supreme Audit Office confirmed that there had been irregularities in visa issuing procedures under the previous government. A special parliamentary committee is investigating the scandal.
The committee will file 11 notices with the prosecutor's office on, among other things, the lack of supervision over the issuance of visas.
Auditors accuse former officials at the Foreign Ministry of allowing thousands of people to enter the Schengen area without proper inspections. Visas were reportedly sold by middlemen to immigrants from Africa and Asia. Law and justice officials continue to accuse the current government of accepting illegal migrants.
They are letting in a lot of illegal immigrants. I repeat, illegal immigrants, not seasonal workers, because this is a fundamental difference.
The most controversial element of the new strategy presented by Donald Tusk is the idea of suspending the right to asylum. According to politicians from the ruling party, the right to asylum has become a tool of hybrid warfare used by Russia and Belarus.
Focus on integration. It sounds good. What sounds bad? I'm not sure whether this issue of temporary suspending the asylum law, whether it will be coherent with international law or not.
The approach to migration has been changing across the European Union. Today, the emphasis of most governments is on security.
Security Europe. This will be the slogan of our presidency in the Council of the European Union.
Poland will lead the Council of the European Union starting on January 1st. Warsaw may want to use its half-year presidency to convince its EU partners that Poland's migration policy is the one they should follow. Marek Steele, TVP World.
The Council of Europe's Venice Commission has weighed in on Poland's rule of law reforms. While the full report hasn't been released, Polish Justice Minister Adam Bodnar indicated that the Commission supports the government's vision. Franciszek Pilis has more.
The verdict is finally here. The efforts of the new Polish government to restore the rule of law in the country following its deterioration during the previous government's tenure are, quote, headed in the right direction. First up is the role of the Justice Minister, who wants to distance himself from the role of Prosecutor General after the Law and Justice government decided to link the two posts. The Venice Commission seems very supportive of the idea of separating the two positions.
The Venice Commission supports the overall direction of the proposed changes, including changes to the system itself. The Commission expressed concerns regarding the status of the National Council of Prosecutors and who would be permitted to nominate candidates to the body, as well as the lack of a procedure to dismiss a new prosecutor general.
This measure is just another in a string of changes the Polish government has pushed or is trying to push through to restore the rule of law in Poland. For its efforts, the EU has already taken Warsaw off its naughty list, closing the Article 7 procedure imposed on Poland under the rule of law and justice, paving the way for Poland to access up to €137 billion in EU funding. Restoring the rule of law, however, is no easy task, especially if the person whose signature you need keeps opposing all notions. Polish President Andrzej Duda has recently recalled proposed changes to the Constitutional Tribunal, which lost its non-partisan approach during the previous government's tenure despite numerous protests from then-opposition parties and the EU.
President Andrzej Duda recently said, and I quote, that he will defend each and every nomination until his last breath. It's a very telling comparison, as his decisions led the Polish judiciary to a state of near ruin.
Secondly, the Venice Commission gave its opinion on the case of the so-called neo-judges.
The term neo-judges is not a legal term. This is just a term that the judges who are appointed by the unconstitutional, let's say, council of judicial council, and this is why they are referred to as neo-judges.
The option proposed to the Venice Commission would include recalling those neo-judges to their previous posts. While the Commission didn't support this solution outright, the Polish Justice Minister said it did seem responsive to working on ways to restore the rule of law in Polish courts. That too, however, just as any other change regarding the Polish judiciary, is likely to be blocked by the president.
Nowadays, our cohabitation is absolutely perceived as a permanent and long-lasting type of the political conflict. So I'm afraid President Duda is stubborn enough, of course, to keep his position potentially independent from the government.
It seems that every analyst is of the same opinion. If any concrete changes are to take place, they will come after President Andrzej Duda leaves his post next year.
Just 2 weeks before Georgia's parliamentary elections, 3 major TV stations were fined for refusing to broadcast a controversial government video. The video comparing the war in Ukraine to peace in Georgia has drawn criticism for promoting a pro-Russian stance. Piotr Mieszczuk reports.
Each of the 3 major Georgian TV stations that refused to put the clip on has been handed a fine of $1,800 for alleged infringement of electoral law in Georgia. The video juxtaposes ghastly black and white images from war-torn Ukraine with beguiling pictures depicting Georgia's finest infrastructural objects. The stark contrast aims to evoke strong emotions in Georgian voters. The controversial campaign video comparing the war in Ukraine to peace in Georgia made waves across the world, further fueling concerns over Georgia's democratic backsliding. By means of the video, the government aims to sow fear of war among the Georgian people, says Kakha Gogolashvili of the Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies think tank.
Their main message is that we are those who provide peace. So they want to give impression to their electorate that only Georgian dream is able to achieve peace and to avoid any aggression, obviously from Russian side.
Given that a whopping 85% of Georgians are in favor of their country's EU accession, the ruling party usually refrains from hostility toward the EU, pointing out that EU officials are simply following their own agenda. At the rally launching the Georgian Dream's election campaign in July, the incumbent Prime Minister boasted the closer ties he had forged with the EU.
Despite all this unprecedented pressure, 2 revolution attempts and artificially created upheavals, the Georgian Dream government maintained peace, ensured unprecedented rapid economic growth and received the EU candidate status.
But the anti-democratic moves are bringing Georgia closer to Russian embrace. Given the anti-democratic designs, EU countries are clearly hoping for a change on the political scene in Georgia.
We have indicated those countries that we assume will be accepted into the European Union first. First of all Ukraine, but also Moldova, the countries of the Western Balkans, and we also hope that Georgia will be accepted after the next elections, which will take place soon. We hope that Georgia will be moving toward the European Union, not away from it.
This marks yet another attempt at cracking down on media in Georgia. Back in August, the Georgian government introduced a Russian-like law that labels media outlets and NGOs with more than 20% of funding from abroad as pursuing the interests of a foreign power and imposes fines on them for not registering with the public record of foreign entities. The controversial law led the United States to pull the plug on $95 million in aid for Georgia.
We're very concerned about the foreign agents law that was passed. I think it's right out of Moscow's playbook, unfortunately, and I think it clearly counters the desire of the overwhelming majority of Georgians to move toward the EU and EU integration.
Anti-media laws, encroachment of public institutions and crackdown on the LGBT+ community have pushed Georgia further away from the European Union. But will the country see a much-anticipated change in power? According to the opinion polls, the shift is inevitable as the ruling Georgian Dream enjoys support upwards of 30%. The election is going to take place on the 26th of October. For TVP World from Warsaw, Piotr Miszczuk.
Thousands of North Korean soldiers are reportedly training in Russia and could soon be deployed to Ukraine, according to the U.S. Institute for the Study of War. Now we go live to Kyiv to our correspondent, Oz Kaderji. Hello, Oz. So what more can you tell us about this situation?
So there have been numerous reports recently in the press citing South Korean and Ukrainian officials talking about North Korean soldiers training inside Russia, potentially to be used inside Ukraine. Now, there was a report in the Washington Post saying this, published very recently. However, it must be said that even the Ukrainians are saying they haven't got any evidence to say that there are North Koreans on the ground now. However, they are worried that this could potentially be a further avenue for Russia to bolster its troop numbers with North Korean troops. Now, as I said, we don't have any evidence that proves that North Korean troops are currently deployed. There were some rumors that some North Korean officers were now on the ground helping Russia use some of the weapons it had imported from North Korea. But yeah, still no sign of any kind of real movement of North Korean troops on the ground here. Now, the Kremlin have denied this, but Kremlin denials are a dime a dozen and obviously aren't worth the paper they're written on most of the time. I think Ukraine is very concerned that Russia could plug its manpower problems with North Korean soldiers. And I think the South Koreans are obviously concerned that this could lead to an escalation with Russian support for North Korea coming in soon as well. So a difficult situation here for the Ukrainians, one they're hoping doesn't come to fruition in the months to come.
Rumors indeed. Thank you so much for the update. Appreciate it, and please stay safe. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Nihon Hidankyo, a Japanese organization representing survivors of the atomic bombings. Our Tokyo correspondent, Gabriela Fresnek, has more.
Nihon Hidankyo has won the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts to eradicate nuclear weapons. Japan is the only country that has experienced a nuclear bomb used against its population, and there are currently more than 100,000 survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki still alive. The atomic bomb was dropped on densely populated Hiroshima at 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945. 3 days later, the same fate befell Nagasaki. The total number of people killed in the two attacks is estimated at between 140 and 240,000, and tens of thousands of people died from their injuries in the coming months. Tokyo residents shared their thoughts on Nihon Hidankyo's message of peace gaining international recognition.
Hidankyo is a group of A-bomb survivors who have been campaigning since after the war. It was already recognized in Japan, but the fact that it is now recognized around the world, it's a happy moment for us.
I really want Japanese people to know that there is such an organization, and I want people around the world to know it too. I think this prize is a good opportunity for that.
The co-chair of the organization and an atomic bomb survivor himself, Toshiyuki Mimaki, said that receiving the award was like a dream.
We will appeal to the world, as we always have done, for the abolition of nuclear weapons and the achievement of everlasting peace.
Nihon Hidankyo's message is particularly important now, during a time of heightened tensions in the Middle East, amid the Gaza war and the ongoing war in Ukraine, as both conflicts involve nations believed to be in possession of nuclear weapons. For TVP World, Gabriela Fesnik.
Hurricane Milton hit Florida's west coast as a Category 3 storm, causing at least 17 deaths and leaving millions without power. Alex Zemlinsky reports from Tampa, where the cleanup is just beginning.
Furniture, belongings, the inside of the whole house, all soaking wet and destroyed by the water brought in by the ferocious Milton when it slammed into Florida. Pitch black streets with no lights unless you have a power generator. This is the aftermath.
We have damage with our covered patio, screen area, some shingles off. We were lucky enough not to have any water damage this time.
With swaths of residential areas of Tampa without electricity, residents have no way of paying for groceries by card, cash only. The hum of generators lets you know a business is open.
We just throw a lot of things in the restaurants, all the stuff that needs to be refrigerated.
Mike runs a family restaurant business with his nieces and nephew. They are now trying to make the most of the difficult situation.
Honestly, we don't have a clear plan on what we're gonna do. We're taking day by day.
The following days are set to be tough, but with the worst behind them, the residents of Tampa say it's the spirit of resilience and perseverance that will get them through it all.
Because every 100 years we get something like this. So if my house is good for 100 years, I'm fine for that. But, we'll rebuild. Like all communities, we will rebuild, and we'll do what it takes to come back.
Some of Tampa's residents may have to start over, but with communities and support like this, that journey will be a little easier. Alex Zemlinsky, Tampa, Florida.
Krakow City Council has passed a resolution to introduce a tourist fee, which could generate up to 12 million euros annually. The residents are frustrated by the increasing noise and disruptions caused by tourism. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
The proposal by the councilman of Krakow to bring back the tourist fee is currently sitting at the Prime Minister's desk in Warsaw. But whether the fee will make its return is still uncertain. The problem lies with the Polish law. Essentially, for a city to have the tourist fee, it needs to meet 3 criteria. First, it needs to have conditions enabling the stay of people for tourism, recreation and training purposes. So far, so good. It also needs to have landscape values. In other words, it has to look pretty. And I think we can all agree that Krakow does not lack in that category. And finally, it needs to have favorable climatic properties, and this is the heart of the problem. In 2015, Krakow lost its privileges to have the tourist fee because of the air quality. The air pollution is one of the worst in all of Poland. At the same time, Krakow is the most popular tourist destination in all of Poland as well. The number of tourists who are coming to Krakow is steadily rising year by year. In 2023, more than 7 million tourists visited this city. Krakow councilmen argue that if each tourist paid just €1 per night at a hotel, the city could get up to 50 million zloty or more than €10 million annually.
This is a huge amount of money that could help compensate for the negative effects of tourism.
The councilmen also argue that the tourists wouldn't really mind paying a small additional fee. The tourists we spoke with today share that sentiment.
No, wouldn't mind at all.
It's not much, right?
Yeah. Of course, beautiful city. I'm fine.
We still have to wait and see whether these regulations will be adopted, but don't be surprised if you come here to Krakow and you see that you have to pay a small fee when you stay at a hotel. From Krakow, TVP World, Kazimierz Wysiak.
Now, as migration continues to be a hotly debated topic across Europe, Poland is navigating the complexity of balancing national security with humanitarian obligations. With recent announcements of suspending the right to asylum and tougher policies to take back control of borders, Prime Minister Donald Tusk faces both support and criticism. What are the long-term implications for Poland's migration strategy? Well, joining us today on TVP World to discuss this critical issue are Dr. Sura Bodniachuk, Assistant Professor at the Center of Migration Research, University of Warsaw, and Agnieszka Minczak, Vice Rector for the research at the Warsaw School of Economics. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So we are looking at the very complex situation of migration here and the new migration strategy that has been announced by Prime Minister Dr. Sarah, can you help us understand and explain the legal implication of suspending the right to asylum, and how does that align or contradict with the European law?
It clearly contradicts not only European law but also humanitarian law and Genevan Convention. It also shows that we don't really align with the policies that have been implemented on a European level, because this is not what the Migration Pact has announced.
So do you think that that is going to become a conflict point between the current administration and the European Union going forward?
Clearly it is. It is the sign of non-compliance, and with a critical statements like this, it's quite easy to also execute compliance, especially if we're the ones who are not, if we're the only ones who contradict that law. Hopefully that will be the case, but also it's quite difficult for us to stand alone in that resolution to suspend the asylum law.
Right, Agnieszka. Now, the term or the slogan "taking back control," a lot of criticism is saying that, well, this is somewhat of a populist rhetoric. What's your take on it, and how do you interpret the framing and the context of this migration policy?
Well, there are different aspects of migration. Asylum seekers is definitely one, and I fully agree that it is a humanitarian right, and it's an international law and international standard that, if we don't comply, that would be quite strange for a civilized country in Europe. The other thing which is very important is that indeed, looking from the perspective of population changes and the shrinking labor force, we definitely need migrations and migrants that support our economy, but also that they need to be integrated. They need to become the part of the society. We already observed that from year to year the number of migrants in Poland is increasing, not only from Ukraine but also from other countries. So we become more and more multicultural society that also requires not only migration policy but also social and labor policies that support integration of migrants into our society.
Right. Well, the Prime Minister has emphasized on national security in his new migration strategy. How do you think Poland's border policies will address the threats of hybrid warfare, particularly with the tense situation at the Polish-Belarusian border?
Well, that's a huge challenge that indeed the government faces, and we don't know the details because it was the first announcement of the Prime Minister. We will see the strategy as announced on the 15th of October, so then we can tell a little bit more. Definitely the issue on the Belarusian border is the one that requires a lot of attention, but let me underline once again, it is only one part of the entire complex migration structure that includes not only migrants that come into Poland, but also Polish people migrating out, attracting the people that migrated to come back to Poland, at least some of them, especially those with high human capital, to boost the skills development, opportunities for them when they return. So there's a lot of different issues and questions that should be tackled in such a comprehensive migration policy that we are expecting.
Right, that's a very good point. We're looking at a very wide array of issues, not just perhaps the border or just an illegal migration or asylum issue. There's actually a various aspect to it. Well, speaking of various aspects, Dr. Sarah, Poland have taken in millions of Ukrainian refugees already, but does this kind of openness contrast with the current country's tougher stance on asylum seeker from other regions?
I think what we've been observed in the past 2 years is the differentiation between those who are better and worse and those who are more preferred and worse. And by saying that, I don't mean that taking on Ukrainian war-fleeing refugees was a bad move. Indeed, for our economy, that was one of the best moves we could do. But at the same time, we accept millions of refugees and saying to others, no, you're not allowed to come. So I guess this is just a matter of those who can integrate and be active in the labor market, because this is crucial. And the rhetoric of security and blocking asylum and posing migration as a threat in the dominant discourse is only going to make that integration worse and much more difficult for ordinary people, because those who are fed by those that narrative that migration is something that poses a threat to us, to ordinary citizens, that's what's going to impact the way how people behave on a daily basis with migrants.
Right, and like you mentioned, this can run contrast to international law. How do you see this kind of playing out on the global stage, especially when it comes to interaction with human rights organizations?
Well, this is, on the one hand, a movement that has been already introduced by Finland, for instance, or in states as well. But when Donald Tusk said it's temporary suspension, what do we mean by temporary? And also, what do we mean by the fact that if it's an exceptional case, how many more people does it take on the Belarusian border for that to be extraordinary? Because that has been taking place already for quite a while. So I don't think it's sustainable, because considering what's happening in the Middle East and behind our on the Ukrainian border in Ukraine as well, this is not sustainable to block or suspend asylum seekers' application. This has to happen, and this is fundamental law to obey.
Right. Agnieszka, you just mentioned that, well, as well as what Dr. Sarah just mentioned, also Poland do need some of these immigrants coming in to kind of sustain its workforce. Is Poland's current migration strategy sustainable in the long term, given that its reliance on foreign labor to support the economy?
Well, first, I mean, we don't have any strategy. So the movements that, I mean, the developments that we have observed is I think, a mixture of various developments that happened on the spot. So with the war, we had this huge inflow of the refugees, of the war refugees from Ukraine. But let me remind you that migrations from Ukraine didn't start in 2022. They actually started to be very visible already in 2014 after the Crimea's accession. So basically we observed that the share of foreigners, not only from Ukraine but also from other countries, is increasingly important. The share of the number of foreigners that are currently working, paying social security contributions, is also increasing. So this is something that is important for our economy. And again, with the population aging, shrinking of the labor force, this is something that will continue definitely. And it is very important, again, to think about how we should prepare also our society for the fact that we'll become more and more diverse country.
Right. So do you think, like many experts warn, there's a risk in these tightening asylum policies? Do you think that could lead to societal and even political consequences?
Well, I think with a statement that we need to be very protective, but on the other hand, saying that we still need migrants to support our economy, that is contradictory by itself. So that makes a policy of integrating migrants into our society much more difficult, because we create prejudices by for example, temporary suspending, whatever it means, the asylum law.
And do you think that politically that's going to have an impact on the Prime Minister's party for having implemented this new migration strategy?
I think this is a very good question, and this is what we're going to see next week. Certainly it draw more attention to political scene and also mobilized the opposition, I would guess, as well. But I think it's also a critical moment because our presidency in the European Union is starting next year. So I think this is also the time when such movement is a good strategic movement. But on the other hand, it's difficult to say what will be the implications.
Right. Now, a lot of attention is paid on the topic, and we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops. Meanwhile, thank you guys so much for the input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.